Greetings! Welcome to the devlog for Alpha 4 of Update 90 of Hot Dogs, Horseshoes, and Hand Grenades. We're going to start off as always with a quick sound check. Make sure your speakers aren't up too high. Wonderful. So what have we got for you this week? Well, this is a little bit of a smaller alpha, as truth be told, I have spent a majority of this week fighting with the bolt actions and trying not to go batty doing so, but managed to fix most of the bugs associated with them, but I'll talk about that in a second. Before we do that, let's take a look at a very, very special toy, or rather a small family of toys. That is, the AK-12. I know a number of folk have been requesting something of more interesting modern patterns of AKs. So let's bring this one under the light and take a look at it. This is the sort of final pattern of the AK-12. I think it's technically the AK-400. We've got a folding stock here. We can collapse. There we go. That's how we do that. Always forget. Boop. Wonderful. Our standard and familiar AK style safety. Let's rock that in there. I'm sorry, I'm not normally one for the sort of like polymer patterned mag, but that one looks sweet. Pull that back. Let's fire some shots. Wonderful. And this is cross-compatible with all of our AK-74 style magazines. So the 10 and 20s go in there, as well as the drum, which will be super handy if you wish to pop an attachable bipod. In fact, let's do that now. There we go. Let's have a little fun with this. Let's grab ourselves an attachable bipod. Lengthen that, pull that out, throw you away, and then if you want to find these are going to be under assault rifle, and let's grab ourselves a drum. Wonderful. And now we have ourselves basically a light support weapon. Bend down here and show that paper target. What for? Haha, wonderful. So there you have the modern AK-12. Fold that up there. And to go with it, I have what for a lot of you may be what's in your head when you hear the words AK-12, which is one of its earlier prototypes. This was from, I believe this is like the 2012 or 2013 pattern, when this was still in development. And I think this ossified in a lot of folks' minds as what an AK-12 was, because it showed up in a couple video games while it was still a prototype. Pop that there. Let's get ourselves, this isn't the best optic, but it'll do. So yeah, so there are some core differences. The bolts up here and ambidextrous. We do not have an AK style safety fire selector that prevents us from doing that. And what's even funnier about this is this is a 4-position fire selector. We've got semi. We have a 3-round burst that's at a higher cyclic rate than the full auto. And then, of course, full auto. A little more full auto. And then that burst again. I know some of you just love those burst fire guns. So here is another one, truly a bit of an oddity. So there you have it, our AK-12 Proto. I hope you enjoy it. It's got a lot of rails to play with. It's got this like bitty one on the front. It's got these two little ones on the side. Those of you who like making fancy looking guns for your vault, this is a really fun, gonna be a fun platform to play with. So there you have it. So, and then beyond those, I have done some things to tune our new bolt action features. The first of which is that because of a number of problems that were occurring, I decided to restrict the new slide bolting purely to when you are engaged with a bipod. The quick bolting where you click on the right side of your touchpad or joystick is for all other moments, like if you're just grabbing its fore or bracing. You will have to be bipoded to use the slide bolting. Now you might be like, that's nice, Anton, but you're using index controllers there, and that felt terrible on the index, and it's totally my fault. I did not test it at all the other week, and so what I have done is I have rebuilt that gesture just for the index's thumb pads. So on other controllers, it's a motion with your thumb where you sort of touch starting at the sort of top or right, and you rotate counterclockwise, and then rotate clockwise again with your thumb. With the index controllers, you touch at the top, and you slide down, and then slide back up again, because of the fact that the thumb pad is narrow, and it feels quite natural. Whap. Oops, as I accidentally eject my mag because I pressed a little too hard on that thumb pad. That is the one thing you'll have to get used to make sure to not apply too much force. I may see if there's something I can do about that where it ignores the down click if it recognizes that you are in the middle of a gesture, if it ends up being necessary. So super fun. So there you have it. Hopefully that should be better. Let's jump out of VR, and I will talk a little bit about what else was wrong with the bolt actions that took so much time this week. Yo, and we're back out of VR. So as I was saying, when you're working on a system for a long time, or a project like H3 you've been working on for years, there's this way you work on sort of, batches of content, and you sort of bank them, and in your mind you sort of check them off like, oh, I've validated, I've certified that content, that data, those values, they're correct, and you stop thinking about them. So when I started to dive into the problem with the bolt action rifles from this past week, a lot of folks reported bugs. Thank you for that. Something like 50% of them had problems cycling using the slide bolting. And the thing that was even more confusing is that they seemed to have different problems with it. Some, it couldn't come up high enough, some they wouldn't go far back enough, some wouldn't close, some wouldn't close on the way down, which was like super confusing because I spent a lot of time figuring out the math. The internal system actually basically like computes a bunch of ideal positions and moves a fake hand inside the simulation to actually pull back and interpolate as you make that motion, because all of the interactions in H3 are built around a hand. So if I want to, indirectly control something, I have to fake a hand doing that motion. So yes, this was failing in a completely inconsistent way across them. And I spent far too much time, debug lining code and looking at it and debug drawing lines and sort of things until it suddenly hit me, wait a minute, what if the code is doing exactly the correct thing and the data's wrong? What if some set of parameters that I am setting, that I had manually set on all of these rifles that worked totally fine or were within the performance tolerances of the bolt system when operating with your hand because of the way in which you like overshoot any gesture in VR. But when given the super precise movement between goals was suddenly not correct, and that ended up being the case. I have a couple variables related to like hand and angular offsets to compensate for differences in bolt handle geometry between their sort of rotational goals. And it turns out that a whole lot of that data that I had set, I don't know, 2 years ago, I had set in a sort of hand wavy way. I hadn't actually measured those dimensional differences. I'd been sort of like, yeah, it looks like about 35 degrees, and then I had tried it in game and it was close enough and it worked. But in this case, with a simulated hand that can't gesturally compensate and overshoot and isn't moving based upon a perceptual sort of feedback loop of like, oh, it's now closed, I'll stop moving my hand, wasn't enough. So it took me far too long to figure that out, and then a whole bunch of time going in and tuning and testing all of those offset variables for every single bolt handle in the game just to make sure they're correct. But it all works now. So, but just think of that as like a little lesson of the fact that like it's very easy to think that all of your problems rely in code, whereas in this case I had sort of screwed myself all over with an authoring process that was far back in time enough that wasn't stored there anymore. So yeah, but beyond that, for this update, I talked about the slide bolting. Slide bolting now correctly ejects a clip, just like cycling or moving the bolt would. I popped an underslung rail on the M40A1, especially just it already has a built-in scope. That's a rifle that needs a bipod desperately. So that's included there. I tweaked the target life values again in the indoor range for the paper target. And yeah, oh, and then I fixed this. This was the other weird bug that took me far too long to realize. That once again, I fought with encode for a while, and then finally had a like, it's the data on the objects moment, which is that something happened when I altered where an object, like basically where in my class inheritance chain of object types in H3, where having a bipod exists. It basically used to be on a firearm, now it's one tier up. Somehow Unity's serialization system had a critical failure just with one derived type, namely the open bolt weapons. And so every single open bolt weapon failed to be able to be gravity grabbed by your hand because that internal flag for being distant grabbable got set to false on every instance of that class in the whole project, all on its own, which is a little terrifying. That's one of those like, oh, the black box failed, and I have no way of knowing how or why it failed, and I hope other kinds of failures like that aren't happening across my saved data of thousands and thousands and thousands of parameters that I can't audit easily. So, you know, little chest tightness, but it's fixed. So hopefully something like that does not break again. Thank you to everyone who obsessively checked every single weapon in the game to assemble a list of all the ones that were broken. So, well, that about does it for this week's alpha. I know it's not super, not a ton changed, but this is what oftentimes happens in this is one of the reasons why the tail end of any game's development takes preposterously longer. It's like 90% of your time is the last 10%, is because tiny things that break can just absorb like an entire week's worth of effort and energy and time, and it's just maddening. But every so often it happens. In terms, I'm hoping that next week's the next alpha is going to be the last for this cycle, in part because I want to get back onto the main branch in time to do something goofy for the 4th of July. But also because the fact that the core features of this update are reaching maturity. For the next alpha, I'm going to get some more paper target types in, as well as the sort of category structure for them. A couple new toys, migrating the paper target over to the sniper range, and adding a couple more features like being able to change its height offset. And yeah, and then if I have the time and energy to try, I'm gonna give the object selection another pass for the gravity grabbing, because I know it's still not great and it's super fussy in the way that you have to fight with it. And I'm finally gonna tear off that band-aid and try to make that work better. So wish me luck. And yeah, anywho, I hope, sorry it took me so long to fix a bunch of these. I know using bolt actions for this whole past alpha probably stunk, but just a reminder, this is anytime I'm on the alpha branch, this is an alpha, which means that shit's gonna be broken, because it has to be broken sometimes on the way to making it better. So I thank you for your patience either way, and I hope you all have a wonderful weekend. Peace.